All right, I got a great show for you guys today. We're going to be going through a lot of topics. We're going to be talking about the United States. We're going to be talking about war. We're going to be talking about Joseph Robinette Biden, a little bit about the miracle shots of COVID, and much, much more. I have with me comedian Jimmy Dore. Jimmy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So about 18 months ago, I came across your channel. I was just seeing what other YouTubers were doing and ended up really liking your show. I like the comedic tone that you bring to serious topics, and yet you cover them with sincerity and with accurate information. And so I appreciate you coming on today. The first question I wanted to go through with you, just get your thoughts, is we have a presidential election coming up, and a couple weeks ago, ABC News made the mistake of putting out a poll that showed Donald Trump up by 10 points. They were immediately chastised by people behind the scenes. Suddenly, that poll disappeared within 24 hours. And now, just yesterday, the New York Times put out a poll showing that Trump is beating Biden in 5 swing states. Do you think Joe Biden is actually going to stay in this race, or is he going to be pressured out as we get closer and closer?
Oh, I think Biden is sharp as a tack. He's only getting stronger every day that goes by. The guy is just kicking ass. And I can't, but you know what? I couldn't believe that they ran him the first time. I thought that he was in last place. Nobody liked him. But what happened was the establishment's original pick for the Democratic nominee was Kamala Harris. And at the beginning of the primary season, there was a big story that she got together with the head donors of the country, the big billionaires, and on Martha's Vineyard, and they had chosen her. And she couldn't get a vote. And she couldn't get a delegate. Nobody liked her. And then and so why did they choose her? So they chose her because they could do all the identity politics with her. She's a woman and she's of color. And so if you attack her, you're a misogynist and you're a white supremacist, right? And so they love that. But the bigger reason was because she was a loyal soldier to Wall Street and the military-industrial complex, Big Pharma, and Silicon Valley. And so, and they go to so then after she couldn't get a delegate, they quickly switched to Joe Biden. And if you remember, because Joe Biden has been the most loyal foot soldier to the Wall Street and the military-industrial complex, and he's got a 45-year track record doing it. And he screwed over workers left and right. He screwed over students left and right, anybody in favor of the banks. And so that's why they shifted to him. And he famously said, nothing will fundamentally change. And so he was reassuring them, don't worry, I've got your back. And so when it came time to get rid of Bernie Sanders, Barack Obama picked up the phone. They gave Pete Buttigieg the transportation deal, and they got everybody else to coalesce behind Joe Biden. Why Joe Biden? Why not Elizabeth Warren? Why not Pete Buttigieg? Why not? Because Joe Biden has a track record of serving Wall Street and the banks and the military-industrial complex, and there was no question about it. He was solid, right? And so that's why they chose Joe Biden, and that's why he became our president. And you can't become the president unless you're willing to serve those interests. Barack Obama's entire cabinet came from one email from Citigroup. Now, and the reason I know that was because Julian Assange revealed that, which is why they've been trying to kill Julian Assange for the last 15 years, because he told the truth. And you don't get in trouble in America or globally for lying. You get in trouble for telling the truth, which is the same reason why they demonize and criminalize Donald Trump, not because he lied. If you think that the establishment hates Donald Trump, if you listen to CNN, they'll tell you the reason why they hate Donald Trump is because he's a big liar. And if you think that the establishment hates Donald Trump because he went to Washington, D.C. and started lying, I've got a vaccine I'd like to sell you. The reason why they hate Donald Trump is because he's such a political novice, and he didn't come up through the political party system, so he wasn't controlled, and he didn't owe anybody anybody any favors. In fact, they owed him favors because he was the one giving them money. And so he would once in a while, because of that, because he was such a political novice, he would tell a truth that the president of the United States isn't allowed to tell. And the first one was that there's a deep state, they run everything, and they want more war. And the second one was, the reason why I'm leaving troops in Syria is because of the oil. It's our oil and we're taking it. That's a direct quote. And so he gave the whole world saw the president of the United States tell the truth about the United States foreign policy for the last 60, 70 years, and they can't have that. The whole world saw that. So then they had to criminalize him and as everything, as a white supremacist, as a Nazi, and now as a felon. And so, and they're using the same, and here's the game that's being played. They're using the same RICO statute that was invented. Let's remember the RICO statutes were invented to go after the mafia, which is why everybody was okay with them. Oh, you're just going to use it for bad guys. Well, now they're using the RICO statute to go against their political enemies, which they're doing globally, right? So this isn't just an American phenomenon. They're doing it. They did it in Brazil, did it in Pakistan. They're doing it here. And so the handful of billionaires who actually run the world, that's the new thing. If they don't have narrative control, if they can't do it, if someone breaks through that, like Trump did, then they have to now criminalize them. They did it to Lula in Brazil, and they criminalized him because he was too far left, and they put him in jail, in fact. And then they thought the center-right guy would win, but in fact, they screwed up, and the far-right guy, Bolsonaro, won, and they didn't want that, right? Because then that, again, puts a bad face on the horrible stuff they want to do to everybody. So they then let Lula back out of prison, and because they know he was the only one who could beat Bolsonaro, so he beats Bolsonaro, and now they've just started criminalizing Bolsonaro. So the same thing that is happening here in the United States now, they're criminalizing the number one political opponent to the establishment candidate, which is Joe Biden. And so they use the RICO statute, and the same grand jury and the same RICO statute they used to prosecute Donald Trump, they used to prosecute protesters to the expansion of the police state in the United States, which is called Stop Cop City. And when I had Cornel West on my show and I explained that to him, and I thought he would be outraged by it, and he wasn't. He pretended to not understand the connection between those two. Well, luckily, I'm not as dumb as a Harvard professor, and I didn't live in ivory towers for the last 45 years. And I didn't endorse Joe Biden in 2020, and I'm not a suck up to the establishment. Luckily, I was able to see through that garbage, and I'm not that I voted for Donald Trump or I like Donald Trump or anything like that, but I remember that saying, when they came for the Jews, I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't say anything. When they came from the trade unionists, I wasn't a trade unionist, so I didn't say anything. When they came for the gypsies, I wasn't a gypsy, I didn't say anything. But when they came for me, there was nobody left to stand up for me. So I can see what they're doing. So the donor class hates Donald Trump, and they got to get rid of him because he isn't going to do as many wars as they want him to do. And he's a bad face on imperialism, right? And so I'm a dumb guy like me, smart enough to see the game being played, that they're criminalizing him, and if they'll do it to him, they'll do it to anybody who stands up against them. If Cornel West was actually going to stand up against the establishment, they would criminalize him. I bet they threatened Bernie Sanders to criminalize him, which is why he rolled over for the DNC and the Hillary Clinton machine, and then the Joe Biden machine, and he rolled over for Wall Street and now the military-industrial complex. So I'm sure they threatened him with that, and he knows that, and so they'll do that to him. They'll do it to Cornel West. They'll do it to Russell Brand. They'll do it to me. They'll do it to anybody that they need to silence. And so I'm surprised that they're still going to go with Joe Biden. I think it looks like they're going to replace him with Gavin Newsom, which is going to be tough, right? Because Gavin Newsom right now is he's in China. What the hell is the governor of California doing in China when his whole goddamn state's falling apart, right? I mean, I don't know if you've driven around downtown LA or downtown San Francisco, any of those places. So I think that they're going to try and give either him, or they're going to rehabilitate Andrew Cuomo. It looks like that's the way they might go too, because Andrew Cuomo was just on Bill Maher, and they brought out a woman who wrote a book saying that all those accusations of sexual misconduct against him were wrong. Well, to me, the bigger problem was he killed a bunch of senior citizens during COVID, and he knew what he was doing. And not only did he know what he was doing, he lied about it. And he lied about the numbers. He lied about everything, but he was lying at the behest of the establishment, so they gave him an Emmy. That's that works. Jon Stewart hung a medal on a Nazi, and they gave him an Emmy nomination for that. This is how this works, right? So if you do the bidding of the establishment, that it gets you rewards, it gets you accolades, and it gets you a lot of money. So I think it's either going to be Andrew Cuomo or it'll be Gavin Newsom. I don't think they're going to try Kamala Harris again because people can't stand her.
Yeah, when she first ran, there was a lot of energy behind her. She was calling Joe Biden, a pervert and a weirdo that sniffed kids. And then all of a sudden, she's the vice
And a racist.
president. Yeah,
And
she's
she
the.
called and she called
It's
him a
like,
racist because of his stance on busing.
yeah, they just set all of that aside in order to keep moving forward. Going to the Andrew Cuomo thing. On one side of his mouth, he's saying, New York needs all this money. New York needs all this help. And then Trump has this medical Navy ship come into port. But then out of the other side of their mouth, they're ordering all these sick people with this unknown virus to go be in these senior citizen homes. And that's where most of their deaths end up coming from is from these poor senior citizens that were trapped with these sick virus carrying people in New York. It's absolutely asinine. Now, you and I are both against all the wars, and I want to remind you of two things. Do you remember when just recently former President George Bush, who rarely speaks in public, comes out and says, you can't just invade a country and kill a bunch of people in Iraq. And then he's like, oh, I meant in Ukraine, and then another one that I just saw this morning that you put out was an old video from George W. Bush where he says, sometimes money is more important than peace. And it's like, oh my gosh, he said the quiet part out loud. And the military industrial complex just rolls forward, bringing in billions and billions of dollars.
You're going back to the prosecution, not to change the subject, but just it's funny to me that they're prosecuting Donald Trump, and people say, "Well, he broke the law, Jimmy. He broke the law." And I'm like, so that's what you're pretending this is about? This is about the establishment all of a sudden cares about the rule of law. Every president in my lifetime has been a war criminal. And if you're going to prosecute Donald Trump for whatever, hush payments to a stripper, or for inflating the value of his hotels to get a loan from a bank, which he paid back, that you can't make that case in an honest way while George Bush and Dick Cheney walked the earth, because they not only lied us into an illegal war, but then they ordered a torture program to cover it up. And Barack Obama was constitutionally compelled to prosecute those torturers, but he didn't. Barack Obama said the reason why he didn't prosecute them is because all those torture crimes happened in the past, and he was looking towards the future. Well, I'm glad. It's good to know that we're not prosecuting past crimes anymore. Isn't that interesting? All the crimes I've committed are in the past too, so I'm glad they're not doing that. I bet all those people in prison are pissed off they committed their crimes in the future. So the real reason why Barack Obama didn't prosecute those people, George Bush and Dick Cheney, was because he works for the exact same billionaire class and the exact same donors that they did. Like I said before, his entire cabinet came from one email from Citigroup. Barack Obama kicked 5.1 million families out of their house while he made sure the bankers got their bonuses. Barack Obama built those cages that Donald Trump put Hispanics in. Barack Obama deported twice as many Hispanics as Donald Trump did. He dropped more bombs than George Bush. That's the kind of crazy, and they gave him a Nobel Peace Prize.
Those bombs dropped and he gets a peace prize.
so that's the game that's being played. I forget the exact question you said, but that's my answer.
Well, just how the military industrial complex really runs the country. You think about, okay, Colombia, they export coffee and cocaine, right? You think about Ukraine and Russia, they export gold and fossil fuels and things. What does the United States export? We export war.
That's right.
Our big trade is that we will go to war and they will abuse trillions of dollars of American taxpayer money, all in the name of spreading democracy around the world. And I think the American people are waking up, Rage Against the War Machine, rallies, shows like yours and mine. It's waking a lot of people up. But I don't know what else we can do that would wake people up even faster to realize our number one export is war. It's guns. It's carnage, and they're making so much money on it. I had someone the other day. They said, why do you think this war continues in Ukraine? I said, because the military industrial complex gets to make billions and billions of dollars, and the president gets to have no American deaths. It's a perfect storm.
Why do you think that's the exact reason why the military industrial complex got rid of the draft? Because the draft creates a resistance to their foreign wars. So they just got rid of those, and then they hollowed out the economy. So it makes poor people want to have to join the military if you want to get a college education, if you want to get training, if you want to get a job, you got to go join the military. So they've turned that into a jobs program, the military, instead of actually having a real jobs program like FDR did. So yeah, it's funny that the justification for carpet bombing civilians in Gaza was that Hamas was beheading babies. And that is horrible if that happened. But, what I say is, well, why don't they do it like the United States does? Why don't they blow the baby's head off with a Christian bomb made by Christians in a Christian bomb factory? That's what Jesus would do.
Wow. Oh, it's hard for me to cover the war topic on my show because I'm so against it, and yet if I don't, I'm not in keeping people in the loop on the biggest stories in the world. But yeah, it's wild what we're living through, and it always
So you're
fascinates me.
you're against the Ukraine war?
I am against the Ukraine war. I think that they could definitely seek for peace, and there would probably be a different outcome. But they continue to provide weapons and war and military intel. And Ukraine, I believe, is going to run out of bodies before they even run out of bullets.
So just like Julian Assange said about these foreign wars, and he was speaking specifically of Afghanistan, that these wars are not meant to be won. These wars are meant to be ongoing. And that's why we did 20 years in Afghanistan. And this was all predicted, by the way, by General Wesley Clark. In 2008, he was on Democracy Now! And he told a story about right after 9/11, he went to visit his friends at the Pentagon, and the people on the inside told him they have a plan to go invade Iraq. And he said, "Why are we going to invade Iraq?" And the guy says, "I don't know." And then the next time he went back, he said, "Hey, look at this. I found they have a plan to invade 7 countries in 5 years. It was Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Libya, Afghanistan, and the Sudan. And they've done all of them except for Lebanon and Iran. And right now, it seems like they're getting ready to do those 2. And so this is the world's terrorist is not Al-Qaeda. The world's terrorist is not al-Nusra. The world's terrorist is not Hamas. The world's terrorist is the United States military and NATO. We have they admit to 800 military bases around the world. There's probably 1,000 because lots of them are secret. We just built another military base. Where do we build the last military base? In Syria, in a country we're illegally occupying, and which is very close to Ukraine. But I'm supposed to hate Putin because he invaded Ukraine, but we invaded Syria, and that's okay. And they're doing it all under the AUMF, which is the Authorization for Use of Military Force, which they gave George Bush right after 9/11, and they said that you could use that to go after terrorism. So now we funded Al Qaeda and Al Nusra in Syria, and then we use them as a reason, a pretext to go into Syria. Israel funds Hamas. And then they use Hamas as a pretext to go in and carpet bomb Gaza and take that land from those people. So I hope people are waking up to that game now, that we're actually the terrorists, and that, there never had to be a war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine was provoked intentionally. We wanted that war. Why? Because Americans had gotten tired of the Afghanistan war. And I remember watching YouTubers like Kyle Kalinske give praise to Joe Biden for ending the Afghanistan war. And that's just a lie because he knows better than that. Kyle Kalinski's obviously been compromised because he knew better than that just a couple of years earlier. And what the question you're supposed to ask is like, well, okay, so he's going to wind down the Afghanistan war. What is he going to do with the money we've been spending in Afghanistan? Is he going to now take that money and invest it back here in the United States, and homelessness, give people health care, education, living wage? No, he just moved all that money and more over to Ukraine. And so I knew that was a scam. I go, well, they're letting him end this war for a reason. And why did he leave all the equipment behind and all that stuff? Because then they have to buy all new equipment. And where does that money go? It goes to the donor class in the military industrial complex. It goes to Raytheon. It goes to Boeing. And so that's why they did all that. And so now all those weapons will be used against us someday if they're not already. And so, and why did they had a peace agreement in March of 2022, right after the war started. They had a peace agreement. Zelensky was ready to sign it. They sent messy hair, I can't think of his name. Boris Johnson over there to let him know, like, dude, if you do this, we're going to kill you. And so he didn't do it. And that's why, Zelensky's been not signing peace agreements, because not only will the Nazi Azov battalion right wing in his own country has declared that they will hang him from a tree if he does that, but NATO and Boris Johnson also told him the same thing. So he's just a puppet. He's just a good little boy, and he's doing what he's told. And what he's told is keep funneling money, keep this war ongoing. But now the United States citizens are starting to get tired of it. And there was a coalition joining the left, right. Matt Gaetz actually got a Speaker of the House fired over partially over funding the Ukraine war. And so people had started to turn against it. So they had to find a new one. And now we have a new one, and it's in Israel, Gaza, and they're trying to bring Lebanon into it. They're trying to bring and Iran into it, which is what they've always wanted. And so they've even declared that if Iran or any of Iran's proxies attack some U.S. soldiers in Israel or anywhere else, they're going to see that as an act of war, and then they're going to use that to go, well, we're sending soldiers there so that that could happen. And Iran has already said we don't have anything to do with the proxies, but they're just going to say they do. They just make it up. We're the ones funding all the terrorists. All right, so don't make no mistake about that. The people funding the terrorists are the United States and our allies like Saudi Arabia. And why are we still in bed with Saudi Arabia? Because of the petrodollar. And the petrodollar is going away because we did a bad move. We thought the American billionaires thought that we could we could screw over Russia with this war. We could blow up their pipeline, screw over Europe with their cheap. Right now, Germany is paying 4 times the rate of for energy that they were before with the Nord Stream pipeline. And right now, and so finally, there are politicians in Germany finally now standing up against it. People from the far left, far right, and the middle are starting to stand up against it. And so if you stand up against this, you're called a right winger, as you know this, and a white supremacist, which they've called, I'm sure they've called you for that, and I've been called the same thing. So what I tell people is I've turned into a real right winger. I'm for freedom of speech. I'm for no censorship. I'm anti-war, and I'm for bodily autonomy, my body, my choice. Those used to be all left-wing positions, and now they call you a right winger for doing that because the establishment is pretending that they're left. The Democrats are not left-wing. The Democrats are a far right-wing party. They're warmongers. They're denying everybody health care. They're denying everybody living wage. They're keeping the borders open. Why are they keeping the border wide open? Joe Biden's doing that because it's a tight labor market, baby, and he's got to suppress wages here in the United States, and that's what this is all about. He's doing the bidding of the billionaire class that don't care about the United States. They don't care. It's just like that movie, A Network. If you've ever seen that movie, when Ned Beatty says there are no countries, there are only companies in the international flow of dollars, and that's what this is all about. And in fact, if we have a civil war in the United States, that's good for them. They don't care. The billionaire class, I mean, they're insulated from all that stuff, and chaos always favors the establishment. They want us to be afraid of a terrorist attack, the terrorists that we're funding. They want us to be afraid of that. So we'll give up our liberties and we'll give up our civil rights. We'll turn our country over to the security state, which we already have. Barack Obama repealed habeas corpus. Habeas corpus, which is in the Magna Carta. Barack Obama repealed that. So now people in the United States were operating on a liberty view from somewhere around the 1100s, and we don't know that. All they have to do is call you a terrorist, and they don't have to give you a trial. It's called indefinite detention, which is what they were doing to Chelsea Manning, which is what they would do to Edward Snowden if they got a hold of him, which is what they're doing to Julian Assange. They don't, and they don't even have to give you a trial. They just keep you locked up forever, and that's the repeal of habeas corpus, baby. And And Barack Obama did that because he was a tool of the military industrial complex in Wall Street, just like George Bush was, even bigger.
Yeah. Can you imagine being a fly on the wall with that Boris Johnson Zelensky meeting where they're like, hey, listen, if you give in to Putin, we're going to take out you and your whole family. Do you understand? And he's like, yes. And they're like, okay, now go get ready for your Vanity Fair photo shoot, right? Like the things that we've
So,
witnessed are insane.
my favorite comedian of all time was a guy named Bill Hicks, and he was talking about how it seems like every president runs as a sensible person, and then they become president, they turn into warmongers and enemy of the people. And he said, I think as soon as you get elected, the CIA takes you into a room and they show you a video of the Kennedy assassination from an angle you've never seen before. And after they show you that, they go, any questions?
Yeah.
And that's that. And of course, we know the CIA killed Kennedy and they killed RFK and probably Malcolm X and MLK too. So I mean, it's almost guaranteed they killed JFK. That's for sure. Dulles did it, and then and he was pissed off that JFK fired him as the head of the CIA for that debacle in Cuba. And but he didn't. He never lost control of the CIA, and very quickly he orchestrated the assassination of JFK, and then he got himself put on the Warren Commission. Who's the guy on the Warren Commission? Who was the liaison with the media to tell everybody what was in the Warren Commission report? It was Andrew Dulles. Dulles, the guy who got fired by JFK, who was the arch enemy of JFK, who most likely ordered the assassination of JFK. He got himself on the Warren Commission, and people don't know this. And even Trump didn't release that stuff. Why? Because I'm sure Trump saw that video too, that film of the JFK assassination from an angle no one's ever seen before, and he knows what he's up against. So he didn't release the JFK files. He didn't pardon Edwin Snowden. He didn't pardon Julian Assange. And so they're not going to kill him, but they will throw him in jail to make sure he can't win an election.
Yeah. Judge Andrew Napolitano said on his show that Trump's last week in office, he called him, or they had a conversation, and he said, Mr. President, you didn't keep your promise to release the JFK files. And he said, one day when we're alone, I'll tell you what I saw. But if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't release it either. So I think that you're onto something with that control. Speaking of democracy, the hot phrase of the last 2 years has been, we're losing our democracy. This is an assault on democracy, an attack on democracy, right? I don't for a minute believe that we're on the verge of losing our democracy, but I do believe politicians are on the verge of losing control of the uniparty. Do you think that this really just comes down to politicians wanting to control us and the American people starting to wake up?
Well, I love that. I'll go back to my Cornell West interview when I said, why do you call Trump a fascist when he was less of a warmonger than any president of my lifetime, but you call Joe Biden a milquetoast neoliberal? And he said, well, Trump is a fascist because he tried to overthrow the government and interrupt the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th. And that would be true if Trump used the military to do that. He didn't. All he did was tell Pence to do something and stuff. So so this idea, again, thank God I'm not as dumb as a Harvard professor, because you think a bunch of protesters, a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up to overthrow the government on January 6th, and son of a bitch, they forgot to bring their guns. Isn't that crazy? So of course they were just pissed off protesters. Half of them got pushed into the Capitol by the FBI plants in the crowd, and the other half got let in by the cops who took the gates away. And I know that happened because Tucker Carlson showed the video on his show, and that's why they fired Tucker Carlson, right? They go, oh, I think they fired him for his racist takes on immigration. No, that's why they hired him. They fired him because he started to tell the truth about the Ukraine war, the military-industrial complex, Syria, and then he started to tell the truth about January 6th, and then he started to tell the truth. He brought Bobby Kennedy on to tell the truth about Big Pharma, and that was the final nail in the coffin, baby. He was done. So again, you don't get fired for lying in America. You get a $100,000, $35 million a year contract, which is what Rachel Maddow got. Rachel Maddow gets paid $100,000 a day to lie to you about all those things. She lies to you about January 6th. She lies to you about Ukraine war. She'll lie to you about any war, anytime, at any point. And why? Because she gets $100,000 a day to do it, and she's the perfect person to do it because she's gay. A gay person isn't immoral. Gay people are more. Everybody knows gay people are the pinnacle of virtue and moral. They wouldn't possibly be the most disgusting warmongering liars, bloodthirsty, crazy maniac self dealers in the world. Oh, except they are, except they always have been.
Wow. I didn't know that. I didn't realize she was making $100,000 a day.
A day.
No wonder she can cry on demand,
And
That's a skill I haven't learned. I'm not making enough from YouTube yet, but I'll keep working on it. It was announced today that
doesn't it ever bother anybody that Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity have the exact same narrative on the Ukraine war and funding Nazis? Isn't that a red flag to anybody? That everybody at Fox News except Tucker Carlson and everybody at MSNBC and CNN have the exact same narrative when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Ukraine, when it came to Afghanistan. Doesn't that bother anybody? Doesn't that that a light bulb goes off in nobody's brain? So they all serve the same people. And again, if they were actually serving the people, they would have fired Sean Hannity. They would have fired Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper used to work for the goddamn CIA, and everybody knows it, which means he still does, because there's no such things as ex-CIA.
Yeah. That's interesting because Big Pharma pays all of the media companies' bills, and war brings the eyeballs. So it's like they're in cahoots with each other. They have to have both, or else the free media falls apart real quickly. The United States is approaching $34 trillion in debt. It was announced today that we now have $1 trillion in interest payments. They say that this is completely unsustainable, that we must do something about the debt. And at the same time, multiple leaders in the federal government are saying we have plenty of money to fund two major wars at the same time. So what is the truth? Can we
It's weird. It's weird that we can afford to pay for healthcare. Literally, we're paying doctors, nurses, EMTs, ambulance workers, policemen, school teachers, we're paying their salaries in Ukraine, and we're paying for their medical care. We're paying for everything. We're doing that for Ukraine. And we can't do that for the people here at home. And I had Marianne Williamson on my show, and she's for the funding of the Ukraine war. And I was like, why do you think they're funding the Ukraine war? And she said, well, we can't. We're trying to help the people of Ukraine. I go, you really think we care about people? You think the government of the United States, the most murderous terrorist organization in the history of the world, cares about people? And if they did care about people, don't you think we'd start with the people here in the United States? They wouldn't even help the people in Maui. Joe Biden wouldn't even go there for 3 weeks. He's sitting on the beach. Then they won't even, they give him $700. They're going to take their land away, and we know it. And they give $100 billion to the most corrupt country in Europe, which is Ukraine, with no oversight. And everybody knows it, right? And it happened like that. If you wanted to give $10 billion to the United States citizens, which would cover that would cover community college for everybody, right? If you're going to do that, that would at least take a decade or two. We have to talk about it. It'd have to be op-eds. There'd have to be town halls. Anderson Cooper would have to interview regular people. $10 billion, that's a lot of money, don't you think? But for $100 billion to the most corrupt country in Europe without any oversight at all, it happens at a blink of an eye. And that's how you know it's exactly 100% corruption. And that's just a money funneling operation. That's what the Ukraine war is. And it's not meant to be won. It's meant to be ongoing. And they're going to keep it ongoing until they start the war in Lebanon and Iran.
Yeah. Just yesterday, Volodymyr Zelensky said one of the things that Ukraine could do for our ally partners is we could actually become a military industrial complex, our whole country, and then you could watch us test these weapons in real time. Like, hello, you have to, people have to die to test these things in real time. Did he not just say he has no value for the human life of his own Ukrainian citizens, but we could sell you weapons?
You sound like a white supremacist.
Have you been reading my comment section?
I mean, obviously, the United. So, I mean, I want to make one more point. You said that the thing they do now is that they try to scare you that if we're going to lose our democracy if you don't vote for the Democrats, right? And I have a friend in comedy who said to me, he goes, Jimmy, I'll go along with a lot of the stuff you say, which actually doesn't sound like he would. But he says, I'll go along with a lot of the stuff you say, but I'm sorry that January 6th, that undermined our democracy. And I'm like, that's what you think did it? You're adorable. Your democracy was stolen from you decades ago. We don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy, which was proven by a Princeton study 10 years ago. Corporations bought your country decades ago, which is why workers hadn't have a raise since 1980. And when are you going to get pissed off about that? The answer is never, because they only get pissed off about whatever the man on the TV tells them to get pissed off about, just like COVID. They weren't upset that the guys who were telling you to take a vaccine were the ones who actually funded the research that created that, and then lied about creating that virus, and lied about people who told you the truth about it. They called them white supremacists. That was called, you were racist if you said the virus came from a lab in Wuhan, which is exactly where it came from. And they weren't pissed off at those people for doing that. They weren't pissed off for Fauci for going around Barack Obama's. He put a pause on that gain of function research, and so he just kept doing it. They just didn't do it in the United States anymore. They did it through a third party, through Eco Health Alliance, and they gave the money to Wuhan lab, and they just kept doing it. And why do they keep doing it? Because they're developing bioweapons for DARPA, for the Defense Department. And how do I know that? Because Dr. Fauci was put ahead of the bioweapons in DARPA after 9/11. That's what this is all about. That's why Dr. Fauci was the highest paid person in the federal government, made more money than the president of the United States. So people don't get pissed off at any of that. They don't get pissed off that Dr. Fauci lied to them about masks. They don't get pissed off that he lied to them about natural immunity or herd immunity. Those three things I know he lied about because he admitted to lying about them. And people don't care. People don't, they still get, because the man on the TV tells you to blame your neighbor for not taking a vaccine. That's who you're supposed to be angry at. So that creates a internal strife in our country. That keeps people distracted from who's really screwing us over, which is the oligarchy. And we don't live in a democracy. Your democracy's been stolen a long time ago. You get to vote, but it doesn't matter who gets to vote. It matters who counts the votes. And that's why they want electronic voting. And we shouldn't have electronic voting. The real voting integrity, this is how you do it. You have to have a voter ID. You have to vote on a paper ballot, and the ballots get counted where you voted. Right now, those votes get put on an electronic thumb drive. That thumb drive gets taken to another location, and then they download that information, and who knows what they're doing with it. So we don't live in a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live in an oligarchy, and that's why I had to get Bill Clinton in there to do the Telecommunications Act in 1996. We used to have 50 giant media organizations in the country, and now we have 6 because Bill Clinton consolidated them. He got rid of all the regulations that kept media companies separate, and so we could have good capitalism and good competition. But now you can 6 companies own all the newspapers, they own all the television stations, they own all the movie companies, they own all the radio stations, they own all the internet. 6 companies. That's it in the United States. And so all those people who you think are journalists are actually just mouthpieces for billionaires, because if they're not, they're out, because there's only 6 places to work.
Yeah, they get fired immediately. Question for you, Jimmy. If asking people to get an ID so that they can vote is racist, then why are Democrats hell-bent on giving illegal aliens IDs?
Oh, look at you. Good point. You got them. You got them in their own headlock.
To ask people to go get one, that's racist. But then they are trying like crazy to get all these illegals an ID so that they can vote.
Isn't that interesting? Good point. Yeah. I haven't thought about that, but you're exact. That's a good point.
Yeah. The other thing,
I used to be against it. I used to be against voter ID because it would eliminate certain people from voting because they didn't have it. And I'm like, well, if they can figure out how to vote, I think they should be able to figure out how to get an ID.
Yeah.
And we need to have voter integrity, and that's part of it. Yeah. And they have it in all the South American wherever they have good voting integrity, they have voter ID.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that you just made me think of during our conversation was you know, Dulles, who's fired by JFK, who's over the CIA, suddenly his heart would just break if he's not on the Warren Commission to be able to control the flow of information. And then we know he allowed thousands of lies into that report to cover his own butt. Now I'm thinking Dr. Fauci. Oh, he suddenly, he's the one that set up all the cards for this virus to leak. What does he do? He puts himself at the head of the flow of information. But this is all coming out now. They're not going to be able to hide. So the question is, will they continue to lie to keep him on a pedestal? I think they will, because big pharma, they can't allow him to be seen as the liar and the hurtful person that he really was.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I still have people, grown up people that I've known all my life, say things like, Jimmy, I trust science. They say that. I trust science because they've been told that by the man on the television. You don't trust science. That makes it a religion. You question science. That's actually called science. And if it can't stand up to questioning and scrutiny, then it's not science, it's religion. Science is based on empirical evidence. And if, they wanted to, the FDA didn't want to release the vaccine trial data for 75 years, 75 years. And nope, that didn't bother anybody. Nobody at MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, didn't bother anybody. Didn't bother anybody at the New York Times or the Washington Post. So nothing. Nobody got upset about that. Sure, go ahead, hide the data. And then when the data comes out, shows that they got rid of the placebo group. So the whole trial data is invalidated. So because there's no placebo group, so you don't know what the hell's going on. Plus, they lied about transmission and contraction. They said that if you got the vaccine, it would stop the virus dead. And if your neighbor doesn't get it, he's keeping this pandemic going. And so you should hate your neighbor. That was always a lie. And then the new lie was, nobody ever said that, Jimmy. They never said it was going to stop the transmission. They just said it would lessen the symptoms. And then I'll show people a video, a 10-minute video of everybody from Dr. Fauci to the president of the United States, to Hotez, to Rachel Maddow, to Anderson Cooper, all saying exactly what I just said, that the vaccine would stop the virus dead and it couldn't use you to jump to someone else. They all said it. It was always a lie. I knew it was a lie. You're telling me they didn't know it was a lie? Of course they knew it was a lie.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, you're supposed to say that even though it doesn't stop the transmission, it does slow the transmission and contraction, and it keeps you from being seriously ill, hospitalized, or dead. That's the context you have to provide on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, and YouTube, these vaccines are a miracle.
Miracle.
Yeah,
I love
they're
the
an
boosters. I have
they're a
4 or 5
miracle.
boosters for breakfast every day. I love it. I
Yeah.
can't get enough of the boosters.
I
And whatever you do, don't look into the Cleveland Clinic study about what happens to you when you take boosters. Whatever you do, don't look into that study.
Yeah. What I want them to do is to bring back somebody really famous, not this Kelsey guy, this football player, but someone old, famous, nostalgic that says, this shot's so good, you can get 7 of them. And then they just put their thumb up and smile, and there's like a beep, like, yeah, get it. Like a Mentos commercial. Instead of a pack of Mentos, it's a 7-pack of shots.
In 1976 or whatever that was, when they had the swine flu vaccine, there was what they call an adverse event. One of every 100,000 vaccines, there was one adverse event. They pulled the swine flu vaccine. And then in 99, they had another vaccine, was the RS something. Now I'm blanking on the letters. And there was 1 to 2 adverse events for every 10,000 vaccines. They pulled it. For the COVID vaccine, there's 1 in every 800 vaccines. There's an adverse event, and it's still being recommended for babies and old people and healthy young people. And you tell me why nobody cares about that. And they still call me an anti-vaxxer, and they still call me a grifter and a liar. But no one will ever tell me what I got wrong, because I didn't get anything wrong. I got everything right. And again, you get in trouble for being right. You don't get in trouble for being wrong. And I can forgive my friends for being wrong about COVID, but they'll never forgive me for being right about COVID.
Yeah. Well, all I know is God gave me this arm for the COVID shot and this arm for the flu shot. That's all I know. That's the only thing I learned.
whatever you do, don't look into the most recent studies about what it means if you get the flu shot and then COVID. Don't and the COVID
I,
vaccine.
I will
Don't look
not look
into it.
into that. I will not.
Whatever you do, don't do your own research.
Yeah. Okay. If people want to look into following you or coming to see one of your comedy shows, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to jimmydore.com. I'm on tour all over the place. Well, right now, I just got back from Red Bank, New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware, which is Joe Biden. And I was in Levittown, Long Island. But right now, what's coming up? I'm going to be in, Covina, California this Sunday, then Burbank, California the day after Thanksgiving. And then in December 17th, I'll be in Oxnard, Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Nebraska, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, and Boston.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fun conversation and I believe enlightening for my viewers. I want to thank you for coming on. I'll make sure to put a link to jimmydore.com and also your YouTube channel down below. I hope you have a great rest of your day.